Hi everyone, thanks again for joining us for Series 5 of the webinar training, Engagement Programs. Joining us today is Eric Nilsson. Eric is a Marketo certified expert. He's worked with dozens of Marketo customers to optimize their Marketo programs. He provides an unmatched marketing automation expertise with hands-on instruction and actionable best practices that help transform any marketing organization into a demand generation machine. Eric works with Show Me Leads, a marketing automations consulting company. As a technology services provider at Show Me Leads, we craft powerful marketing automation solutions and ensure long-term success for our clients. We do this by customizing and deploying the Marketo platform, generating and nurturing quality leads, ensuring long-term success and quality lead qualification efforts, and crafting powerful marketing automation to help grow our revenue. Our selection of programs and services address a wide range of problems clients experience, so we can tailor solutions to their unique needs. Whether it's becoming an extension of your marketing team, creating custom email templates, performing health check audits, assisting with training or integration needs, we help optimize your Marketo instance. Now, before we go ahead and get started, we want to encourage everyone to submit questions during the webinar. We'll answer these questions at the end of the session during the Q&A portion of the webinar. With that, we'll go ahead and get started. Eric, I will pass it over to you.
Thank you, Courtney. Hello, everyone. I'm glad you were able to join. Today, we're going to be talking about engagement programs. I wanted to just cover really quickly the past webinars that we did, all of which there are recordings of. I believe these were sent out as part of the confirmation and invites, and I believe they'll be sent out after the webinar as well. We did do email programs and data management before the holiday, and form creation, email creation the last 2 weeks. Today is the 5th and final installment of this series about how to create engagement programs. So I want to kind of give a little bit of background first on engagement programs. One, this is going to be mostly instructional, but also we will tie in some higher level concepts to that instruction. So if you guys have used engagement programs in the past, you will see some instructional type things, some basic instructional type things that may be something that you've done before, but we did want to target this at people who maybe were new to engagement programs. And then for those of you that have, we will try to tie in some higher level concepts. So let's talk at least a little higher level about engagement programs. Engagement programs are essentially a replacement for what used to be drip campaigns in Marketo. Engagement programs still feel new to me, but it was actually about 4 years ago that they put this into Marketo, at least maybe 4.5 years ago. It used to be that if you wanted to do a nurture or drip campaign, a company would set up this series of campaigns that fed off of one in each other, all with different schedules, and you'd have 10, 15, I've seen as many as 20 campaigns, all set up to do a nurture campaign. This became very tedious, messy, and anything else you can think of. It was not a really great way to pull this off. So Marketo came up with engagement programs. It was an idea that allowed them to make one thing, one container, to allow drip campaigns, nurture campaigns to happen. A lot of times engagement programs are also called nurture programs. The official name is engagement, but I've heard it used interchangeably. So that is a little bit of background on engagement programs. It is a vast improvement over the kind of manual way that people had to do things before. So let's kind of get the easy stuff out of the way first. How do you create one, right? Well, keep in mind it's a program. So very much like an email program, like a normal program, you are going to create a new program by selecting new and then new program. You'll type in the name and all that, and when you select program type, instead of default or event or email programs, you're going to select engagement. Once you do, you're going to have a series of streams. So essentially, a stream is a set of emails that are going to go out in order on a certain cadence. You will have multiple streams in most cases where if certain things happen, you will move from one stream to the other as you go through the nurture. A lot of times you'll see 4, 5, 6 streams in a nurture program as they get more complex. If you want to add content, which of course we have to do, you can add the content here by just clicking the Add Content button. Usually what you'll do, as you see here on the left, you'll have a series of emails within the nurture program from an organizational standpoint. You want to keep them inside the program. And then you simply add them to the program. It's quite easy. So you add one to the program, you select the email, and you're pretty much done. You can also just simply drag it over, which is clearly the easier way to do this sort of thing, is to just drag this over. Now, this is the easiest and simplest way to use engagement programs. Have a series of 3, 4, 5, 10, 15 emails that you want to go out in order based on a certain cadence. There is another way to do this, and that is adding programs. So how do you add a program? Why would you add a program? Well, you want to keep track of statistics within the email program, but perhaps you want to also track things at an email level in terms of membership and that sort of thing. So what will happen sometimes is you will add a program to a stream. So you'll go to streams, and when you go to add content, you'll select program this time instead of email, and just select the program that you want, and then you'll see a selection for Smart Campaign. So in order for a program to work, you need a Smart Campaign that basically says send the email, and an email that is obviously in there to be sent by that campaign. So you're still sending an email and nothing changes there. But what you're doing is triggering a campaign within the nurture program to then send an email. This allows for tracking at the campaign level. This allows for tracking at the program level for specific emails, and then also allows you to continue to track at the engagement program level. So it's just a question of how much you want to track and how much granularity you want with that. Similarly to the emails, you can drag the program over as well. So as long as you have a Smart Campaign within the program, and that Smart Campaign is being triggered by the engagement program to send an email, then you're able to bring that over. Cadence. So this is the other important part. If you're going to set a stream cadence, you basically are going to go to set the cadence. What was it again? It's set stream cadence is the thing to hit. And then you're going to choose how you want to do this. So you want to choose the repeat. So weekly, monthly, no repeat. That's fairly rare. Usually it's weekly. I've rarely seen monthly get used. And then you can't see it here in this screen, but we'll go over here and you'll have first cast. So when do I want this whole thing to start? Let's say we want it on, and this is going back a few years, but let's say we have June 17th. So that means the very first email is going to go out on June 17th. But the cadence then at that point, and here that it's changed to May 22nd, every 2 weeks, I've seen every week, every 2 weeks, usually not more than 2 weeks in general. You don't want to bombard them with email after email after email, but you don't want to lose track of them either. If you're going to nurture them, usually once a month is not going to do the trick. So 1 to 2 weeks is usually the case. You select the dates. So every 2 weeks on Wednesday and Friday. So what does that mean? Okay, so they're going to get the first cast on the first cast date. Let's say, for the sake of argument, since we're in 2018 now, let's say that's going to be February 1st, which is a Thursday, if I recall correctly. So it will go out on Thursday. And then we've set it to go out every 2 weeks. Actually, let's say February 2nd, because that's a Friday. And then it's going to go out every 2 weeks on Wednesday and Friday. So what that means is it'll go out on the 2nd, and then it'll wait 2 weeks, and it'll go out on Wednesday and Friday in that 2-week period. It would not go out this week on Wednesday, because Wednesday happens before the 2nd. And you can play around with that. I have seen people actually have all 5 weekdays selected. So it's basically saying every single day of the week with every 1 week. And so they're basically saying every day I want to send them something. That's not necessarily recommended. You know your audience better than anybody, but certainly bombarding them with emails is probably not the best thing to do. The most common thing I've seen is actually what you see here. Twice a week, every other week. Sometimes twice a week, even every week, is a favorite out there as well, and that's not so bad because you're not bombarding them. Tuesday, Thursday is usually pretty popular, as those tend to be the days that most people send out their marketing emails, and those are usually the heavy days for sending out marketing emails. The other thing you see here at the bottom is you're going to select the time. So you can control the time that you want these to go out. Now, you can send them out overnight. You can send them out end of day, beginning of the day, middle of the day, whatever you want to do. Just keep in mind it's going to be the same every single time that these emails go out. So you're not going to be able to vary the time, like on Wednesday sending at 9 and Friday sending at 2. I know that's a request I've gotten in the past, and hey, I really wish it would do that, because Friday's a little different for me, and I want to make sure I catch them before the weekend, so I want to send it earlier on Friday, but normally I'd want to send it at, say, 2. You can't do that, unfortunately, so you will have to pick a time for all of them. Once you've set up a stream, one of the things that is kind of nice is, like almost everything else in Marketo, you can clone it. So you can basically clone that stream, get certain things in there, and then, obviously you're going to change things up a little bit, but it's at least a way to get maybe the cadence already in there or something like that, just to make life easier. So there are a few things you can do under that gear that you see there, where it says early stage, and on the right there's a plus and a gear, and one of them is to clone. You'll notice below that you can also delete all content. So let's say you were cloning it only to keep the cadence. You could also, that's activate all content. You can hit delete as well, but you can get that going. Now, activate content is an important thing to understand, and unfortunately it's hidden by the hand there. Once you drag an email over, or you insert an email into a stream, it's not going to work yet. You basically can set it up as a staging initially, but you have to activate the content. And what does that mean? Well, it's not like approval, right? Your email does have to be approved. That's a given. But activating it just basically says, okay, I'm ready for this to be part of the stream. It's good to go. I want this to go out as part of this whole nurture that I'm doing. You would activate the content for an email, and you'll get that little green arrow pointing at it. That means it's ready to go, and it will be part of this engagement program. Activate all just makes life easier if you just want to put them all going there. And then, certainly you can delete as well as you go. Keep in mind that, once your engagement stream is going, it's a little sometimes difficult to recall how it goes. But what it does is it says, looks at the list. Let's say you have 10 emails 1 through 10. And it looks, in the next cast date, it looks at you and it says, what's the last piece of content that this person got? Okay, they last got email 3. It's going to send whatever is after email 3. If email 4 is not activated, it's going to go to the first one that is activated. Let's say, though, that you inserted number 4 later. right? Or let's say you had email 4, but you decided to insert 3A because you wanted that to go out first. 3A is going to be there and say, okay, what's the first piece of content that they haven't gotten? Well, now that you've inserted 3A, it's going to go with 3A, and then it'll go to 4, and so on. So just keep track of the order. Keep in mind that when you add things after the fact, that it will have an impact on people. For example, it does look for the first thing you haven't gotten. So if you insert something too high, your people that are pretty well engaged already into these things are basically going to get the newer content, and maybe that's not something you wanted. So keep in mind the order. My recommendation is usually to try to make sure you have the entire set and order ahead of time so that you can definitely make sure that everything is ready to go instead of trying to play around with inserting and that sort of thing. So just a word of advice. I know it's not always plausible to do it that way. Creative sometimes isn't ready right away. So the best you can do in terms of getting things ahead of time, the better. Just be really careful, because remember, once they get through the last one, they're exhausted. And you don't want that to happen too early. So just something to think about. Next up, let's talk about testing. So you select your engagement program, and you can go under the program actions and say test stream. And then what you do is you select a test person from the dropdown. And remember that the content will not actually go out, right? So keep that in mind. You don't have to worry about the content going out. And then you set the initial stream, right, which usually is going to be stream 1. After the person goes through the transition rules that you had previously set up, you click the refresh icon, and the new stream will appear indicating a successful test. In these webinars, as a overarching theme through all the webinars has been test, test, test. And so I recommend doing this. It allows you to bypass having to wait a day, a week, that sort of thing. It puts that lead through at a much faster pace so that you make sure that the progression is correct. So basically, it's just, again, it's something that you want to make sure that you've done. I've seen people skip this part, and in many cases, they're fine, they're successful. But this is just such a useful tool to make sure that everything's working fine, and speeds up the process. So just something to think about. Let's talk also about how you get this thing going, right? How do I make sure that this thing gets going? Because I've set everything up. I've activated my content. And so you would think, hey, okay, I'm ready to go. I've activated my content. Well, unfortunately, with an engagement program, there's another thing you have to do to get that to happen. An engagement program has an on-off switch. And it is by default obviously turned off because it's kind of a way, it's almost a different way of approving. It's almost like you're approving the engagement program, but it's more of an on-off type of thing. So you'll see on the screen where it says program status is on. You basically need to go there. If it's off, you want to turn it on. If it's on, if for some reason you've started this engagement program and you've decided, you know what, this isn't working the way I want to, I'm going to call the whole thing off, you can turn it off. Maybe you want to turn it off for a period of time because you're doing some additional testing, or creative isn't here in time, and you just want to make sure things don't continue too far. You turn it on and off. This is something that a lot of people forget, and that's I know this seems simple, and I know this seems really, really, really simple and basic. But it is something that people forget. They see that they've activated their content, and they're basically going to say, okay, I've activated my content, I'm ready to go. And unfortunately, you are not. So I do want to take a moment to kind of go over some of the high-level pieces of engagement programs. We've talked about some of the nitty-gritty details, turning it on and off, creating it, setting up streams, that sort of thing. There's also a great deal of good reporting around engagement programs. There's dashboards and that sort of thing in an engagement program. The power of the streams, especially as you get to multiple streams, you'll have transition rules where if a certain thing happens in stream 1, I now want to pull it over to stream 2. And then if the lead does X, Y, and Z, I want to pull them into stream 3, and so on and so forth. So there's some pretty powerful tools in there that you can use to really make these things zip along and be very effective. So I do want to throw that in as well. Again, organizationally, this is far superior to a series of campaigns that feed off of one another, which is, again, how things used to be done. I've seen customers still doing this because they didn't know anything about engagement programs. And that was the impetus for me actually wanting to do this as a subject for a webinar. So I hope that you have found that helpful. I did want to keep that at a really basic level. I would suggest that everyone go in and play around with an engagement program. Don't activate it. To get a feel for how it works. Definitely take a look at some of the Marketo documentation that they have on it. It's docs.marketo.com. Certainly consult with people who have used it before. We're certainly happy to help in that case with some of the more advanced things. But I'm going to turn it back over to Courtney as we address maybe some questions. So please go ahead and submit your questions.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, if you haven't already submitted your questions, please do so now. We do already have a few questions waiting.
Oh, great.
So we'll go ahead and get started. The first question is from Jim. Can you speak about transition rules a bit?
Yeah, so I know I glossed over that a little bit, partly because transition rules could be a topic in and of themselves, because there's a lot going on with transition rules. But the basic idea of a transition rule is you're creating what is like a trigger. And in fact, when you pull up transition rules, it will look very much like the smart list of a trigger campaign. And you will put in there filters and triggers of events that you want to happen. So let's say, for example, that your nurture programs are really trying to get them to fill out a form. Again, this is just an example. So I'm sending them these emails every week with different content, but at the end of the day, I want them to fill out Form A. Well, what you can do is in Stream 2, you can set up a transition rule that says the minute a lead has filled out Form A, I don't want to send them any more of the content from Stream 1. I now want to move them to Stream 2 immediately, bring them over and start them down that nurture path. And you'll have some other purpose in Stream 2 instead of filling out the form. Maybe you want them to visit a certain page, that sort of thing, right? It can vary, but the idea is still the same. I want to pull these over to the next stream if this happens. So I hope that helped. Again, there's a whole topic around this that would be its own webinar. So I don't want to get too far into that, but just understand that it's a trigger. It's basically like a trigger campaign, and it will effectively move people from one to the other. You can also do that in a campaign itself. There are actually flow actions that are to change the stream. So you can definitely change the stream of that person. So there's a couple ways to do it. I like transition rules because, it keeps things compact and in the same place. So I hope that helps.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, that's great. The next question is from Beth. Are there any situations where campaign-based drip would be better than an engagement program?
Yeah, so in my opinion, no. Other people may have different opinions on this, but I want to continue to stress that I'm a stickler for organization, and keeping that tree at the left-hand side of Marketo as clean and organized as possible, and as small as possible, so that you can actually find things. So for me, I'd rather have as few items as possible in that that tree, and keep it more asset related in terms of emails, and then programs if need be. But for me, I just don't like the idea of having this series of campaigns. It's really confusing sometimes. It's not very malleable if you want to change things after the fact, which you can do with engagement programs. So that would be my strong recommendation. And as a thought, this isn't part of the question, but as I said something, it triggered something in my mind. Keep in mind when you are adding a program to an engagement program, instead of an email, right? You're pulling over a program. You cannot pull over anything but a default program. You can't pull over an email program, for example, which we covered in a previous course. Email programs are their own animal, and it would, as you start to understand email programs, it just wouldn't make sense to be able to pull those over, but I've seen people try. So you want to keep it to a default program. So I know that wasn't part of the question, but just as I was answering it, it brought that to mind, and I wanted to bring that to people's attention as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate as much info as possible. So it looks like we do have time for about one more question. The last question is from Sandy. Can I move leads from streams out of order?
Yeah. One, you have your transition rules that are looking for a specific activity, and maybe you have that activity in the third or fourth stream. Similarly, as I was mentioning, you can do this in a campaign, and you can set engagement stream, or excuse me, I think it's change engagement stream is the name of the flow action, and move them wherever you want. It's fairly normal, in fact, to do that, because I've seen people who have stream 1 and then they have 2A, 2B, and 2C, depending on specific actions. 2A, it's still the second one, but I want to bring them to 2A if they've done this. I want them to bring them to 2B if they've done this, and 2C if they've done this. So it's actually really normal to do what you've asked in your question. I don't generally see, and I don't recommend going backwards. There's not many scenarios, if any, that I can think of where that would make sense. Maybe I've just never seen one, but certainly never seen a case where I'd want to go backwards. The whole idea is you're nurturing the drip campaign, and you wouldn't drip up, you would drip down. So you certainly don't want to go backwards. But I hope that answers the question. You can definitely skip, but I wouldn't skip backwards.
Thank you. So it looks like we are all out of time. We want to go ahead and thank everyone for joining us today. If you have any questions or you want to request your health check from Show Me Leads, please feel free to contact us at info@showmeleads.com. Thanks again, and we look forward to sharing more with you next time. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.